Afternoon, everybody. Welcome. My name is Francisco Sirvent. If we haven't met before, nice to meet you. I definitely see some people on that I am familiar with. So welcome back to those of you that I have known for a while now. It's good to see everybody here. Today's topic is something slightly different. Before we dive into it, I do want to do a couple housekeeping quick items. First, this is being recorded, so we are going to share this, and I will have some time for Q&A, but during the Q&A, just make sure not to ask anything that's too much disclosure, and I want to be able to answer questions, but I don't want you to have to reveal anything too personal, obviously. If you missed any of the other webinars we've done, we are getting them all up onto our YouTube channel. Easy to find, youtube.com/Keystone Law Firm. Go back, find any of our old webinars there. This one will be posted there as well. So if you like what you learned today, you can share it with somebody from that site really easily. The questions, I would prefer just to manage the sound so that nobody is blocked from hearing my voice. If you would send those in by chat message, you should be able to find a little messaging icon somewhere on your screen, and you hit that. You can type us questions. That's open the whole time. I'll try to watch that and answer them as we go. If I don't catch it, then I will make sure to have time at the end and go through those questions. Obviously, anything that's more personal, just reach out to me and I'll speak with you privately about that. I do want to also mention next week we have another webinar on the 25th. I'll post the link to sign up for that if you haven't already, where we are going to talk about Keystone acting as your successor trustee if you don't have somebody to do that for you and your family. It's a new service that we're rolling out, so I'm excited to explain that in more detail next week when we meet again. So for today's topic, the big title is you're already paying 1%, but are you getting full value for it? And this is something that has been a big focus of ours for many, many years back, probably in 2012 or so, 2013, when we formed Keystone Law Firm and Wealth Partners, and we offered everything under one roof, from financial planning, tax returns, estate planning, all of it just right here in Chandler in our office. And that went amazingly well. A few years ago, Keystone Wealth Partners as a separate portion was merged off into another company. And soon after that, we reformed and got our feet under us and now have that financial planning arm in-house under the brand Lifestyle Planning. And so we're going to talk about what I think should be included in all of the services when you're working with a comprehensive office that does everything under one roof. Back when we first started, 12, 13 years ago, I think we were maybe only the second firm in Arizona to do something like that. Now it's a little bit more common. You see a little bit more of that happening. It's still not the standard, and so I love seeing that it's starting to gain some traction and more popularity, because I think you guys should start to expect that from your professional advisors. But the reality is it's just hard to coordinate all that stuff, and that's what most people are left with, is trying to get their lawyer to talk to their financial advisor and everybody to talk to their CPA, because one discipline says, well, you got to do your beneficiary designations over with your advisor, and your advisor says, well, we don't give tax advice, you got to talk to them, and we don't give trust advice, you got to talk to your lawyer. And you get all these people who are trying to coordinate for your best interest, but it's just hard when they're all in separate businesses and everybody wants to make sure they're protected from practicing outside the scope of their license. And so it's hard to coordinate that stuff. When it's not all coordinated, you're the one left trying to figure it out. And what's really fun about what we do and what we've done is that we have worked with a lot of people who have done an excellent job of figuring out what it's like to be the master coordinator of all those different pieces of the puzzle. But some people are like, I don't want to have to figure it out anymore. And so you got to look for some business that does it all under one roof. The reality is, as we review and review and review more and more people's situations, people who are already working with an advisor on their financial planning or their investments, it's really, really common for us, at least internally, for the first thing we do is to review their entire financial picture, their investments, their savings, their retirement accounts, and get a snapshot at least of what are the actual fees and costs that you are paying on your accounts. And so, I want you guys to walk away with at least a couple nuggets from this time. This is one of them. If you walk away from this knowing how to ask these questions, you will be able to figure out how much you're actually spending on that piece of the puzzle. Okay, so there's a lot of costs that are some are easy to find out and some are not so easy to find out, but there's a lot of cost and expenses that come out of your investments, that come out of your retirement savings, and are going to somebody. They're going to a company, to a professional, to somebody, and they are not going back into your account. And we see people unaware of this a lot of times. So I still want to hammer and start on this point, because those costs are affecting your financial security. So the typical one is sometimes called an advising or management fee. And more common, this is a percentage of your investments that are being managed by an advisor. And we see these range anywhere from as high as 1.75% and even all the way down to maybe 0.5, or did I do that wrong? Yeah, 0.5%. And it just usually depends on how much you have invested with them. The more you have, the lower that percentage. So you can imagine somebody who's got $100 million, they're going to have a very, very, very small management fee, because it's not like the work proportionally scales with every dollar additional that is being invested. So usually those fees go down as you have more invested. You'll also, something that's across all investments that are any kind of grouped up fund, like a mutual fund or an ETF, you're always going to have internal expenses, sometimes called a ratio, an expense ratio. This is something you don't see. So it's not line itemed on your statement. It's not billed on your account. It's not something you write a check for. It's a fund fee. So if any of your investments are in a mutual fund or an ETF, that fund, it's a fund and it holds usually multiple stock. Okay. Well, somebody has to be paid to manage the fund, and that's what these expense ratios are. We see these expense ratios anywhere from 0.04% all the way up to 2%, just depending on, or even higher, but those would be typical numbers. And that's what is paid out of the fund to the manager of the fund before they report to you what your returns have been for the year. So as an example, some fund earned 10% in the year. It went from $100 to $110. Okay, they're reporting to you a 10% return for that year. What actually happened, if they have a 2% management fee, 2% expense ratio, what you should know is that fund actually earned another 2%, but it's coming off the top and it's going into the fund manager's pocket as their fee to create and manage the fund. So that's something that you should always be looking at. What are your expense ratios? What are the internal expenses? You want to look for revenue sharing agreements. These are a little bit hard to find. These are private contracts between, okay, between sometimes an investment company, an advisor's company. Okay, it's between the company and who they're placing investments with. So you may have all heard, there was a few years ago, there was a big one that came out, and not to pick on them, but just to give you an example, between Edward Jones and the funds they were placing clients in, there was a revenue sharing agreement, which basically was something like, hey, if you place enough of your clients' investments with our funds and our funds earn revenue, we will share that revenue with you, the company. And then, that would obviously trickle back down. So those are revenue sharing agreements. Again, those payments are going to impact the performance of your investments because it's money off the top that is not part of the growth that you get back in your accounts. You definitely need to know about commissions. These are maybe, hopefully, more rare these days. 20, 30 years ago, almost all investments had commissions attached to them as a front end load, a back end load, where basically you put 100 grand in with an advisor and they got 5%, 8% right off the top as a commission because they placed it with these companies, and those companies paid direct commissions for placing investments into those funds or those investments. That's a little bit more rare these days. I think a lot of consumers are aware that that's not a very good deal for them. And so they're looking for places to avoid that because it just comes straight off the top. But they still exist. They also can exist in a big way on variable annuities. So if you have a variable annuity, for example, we just looked at one for somebody with, I think it was with Lincoln, and it had a big annual fee of about 2.5% as a commission, and that's just coming right off of the account that would otherwise accrue to you. And you can usually get out of those variable annuities. Sometimes you can, sometimes it's not worth it. But if you can get out of that, might as well save that money. But when you add all of these things up, these are all the expenses of investing that you are paying. Okay. So when you're talking or interviewing or listening to an advisor and they say our management fee is 1%, it's 1.5%, and they say something like that, you need to know that they are usually not also including the rest of these things. So these are questions to ask. Well, does that include the expense ratio? Does that include what are your revenue sharing agreements with the places you're recommending me to place money? Does that include any commissions that are going to be paid to you by insurance companies, whether it's an annuity or life insurance or something like that? Because these stack up quick. And if on top of all of these costs of investing, you're also paying a CPA out of pocket, you're also paying for your legal services out of pocket, you're paying all of these things out of your financial security. So make sure you're aware of these, okay? Let me clear my screen, just like that. All right, so before I dive into the whole package, you're going to be looking at all these things, and generally speaking, we're looking at legal services, we're looking at tax services, and we're looking at financial services. We're looking at how do they cross over? How can they cross over in that little spot for your benefit? Getting them to cross over up until this point has been really hard for professional advisors to figure that out because of the licensing. It's difficult. And so you get where you are, and you've done a great job managing all of that and coordinating all the pieces together. And a lot of people feel kind of stuck. Like, I've been here, I've been with this advisor for a long time. It's been 20 years. They've really helped us. They've done a great job. And there's a lot of perceived hurdles to make a move, to make a change that might be way better for you. You might save a ton on those investment costs and all your services coordinated together, but it just feels like a giant hurdle. I just want to address a couple things because there's honestly some work to do if you ever decide to make a change. What it shouldn't be, and I challenge this directly, what it shouldn't be is that person I've worked with for 20 years, their feelings are going to get hurt. Okay. I start with that because truthfully, this is your money. This is 100% your life. This is your security. This is maybe you want to leave an inheritance behind. What my feelings are, what Bank of America's feelings are, what somebody else's feelings are about it, that is not a factor in you making a decision that's best for you. It can't be. Now, I get it if it's your brother, your sister, your brother-in-law, a close friend who's been helping you with this, that's a different dynamic. But if it's a professional who's been helping you, their feelings about it really cannot be a factor. That is the wrong way to make your decision around this. And then on top of it, you're not telling them they did a bad job. You're actually telling them they did a great job. I mean, when we were kids, think about this, or when you had kids, you took them to a pediatrician, right? I mean, you didn't take them to a geriatric doctor. You took them to a pediatrician, and the pediatrician did a great job. My son, he turned 18 in July, and most of you know he's traveling out of the country right now. Before he went out of the country, he had to do like the doctor checkups and stuff before he left, right? Well, he left the first week of August, and he's a 6 foot, fully grown man. And so my wife is like, I'm not taking him to a pediatrician. I'm taking him to a regular doctor. Well, the regular doctor's office said, no, we won't see him. He's not 18 yet. We don't care that he turns 18 in 2 weeks. And my wife was just like, are you kidding me? So she had to take him to a pediatrician. It was hilarious. But regardless, the pediatrician is there for that stage of life. And that's what they're great at. You don't feel bad, or you don't stay with them as you become an adult and as you move through life. And as we get even older and older, we change the type of doctors we go see. It's the same thing with this. There are some advisors whose focus is on helping you grow and manage that growth as you're accumulating. That's a very distinct phase of life. It is a very different stage of life and a very different set of skills and tools when you are at the point where now you're going to start spending that, and the income has stopped, and now you're looking at a bunch of different types of factors that are impacting you. And so it's just a different stage of life. We say thank you to the advisor who did such a great job. This next stage, I need something different. And so we haven't seen anybody who's decided to make a switch where the old advisor threw a giant fit or something. They didn't like to lose the business, but they understood I can't deliver all those services that you need for this next stage of life. It's a little bit of a hassle to move, and we get that. It's not as bad as like all of your credit cards being fraudulently hacked, which I had to deal with a few weeks ago, but it is switching some things. Most of it happens on the back end. There's no tax consequences when you decide to switch. It's more like buying a new car where you go to the dealership, you leave the old one there, sign a bunch of paperwork, you take the new one home, and you have to call the insurance agent and do a couple things. It's closer to that than it is to lose or have your credit cards hacked. It's still a pain in the butt. But the reality is you've been a good CEO of your life. And if all of these services I'm going to talk about, if these are what you're handling, you're taking on a lot and you're doing a great job. And some people, it's just the time for them to say, how could I maybe save some costs on what I'm spending and get a little bit better services? So that's what I'm going to talk about. Our retirement management office, that's our combined service where we bring it all under house. Because when you have all these services in your life, right, you have the tax, you have the legal, and you have the financial. If they aren't overlapping, if they aren't talking to each other, you've got areas of risk, right? Anytime they don't overlap or talk to each other, these are areas that you are completely in charge of. and there's maybe some overlap on a little bit. And then the golden spot is where you have overlap on all of it. We had a client recently, I just remembered this, who an Edward Jones advisor proposed a CD. And, a year ago, 2 years ago, you could get CDs at really good rates. And it was at a good rate, I think like 5% or so. And they're like, this is great, give us that CD, lock it in. And there you go, like an extra 5% guaranteed, right? The problem was there was not a look at the whole comprehensive picture. And what happened was when that CD matured, they got paid back their principal plus their interest, and it fell in a year where that interest amount, the interest they earned on that CD, was just enough to push them over the limit for Medicare penalties. And those penalties can go for 3 years. And so they're looking at that, shaking their head, saying, we're going to spend more money on Medicare penalties than we got in interest. Getting these things to talk to each other is important. It can have actual real dollar impact in your pocket. So what is all this stuff? So everything that you put and you bundle into your life and you manage covers those 3 things. Generally, that's how we categorize them. Okay, tax, financial, and legal. Everything you're already managing. You may not know you're managing all this, but these are all the things you're managing. And in my opinion, if you can combine all of these things into one office that's doing it all for you, you shouldn't be paying any more than you're already paying for your financial planning services. So what should be included? All of your tax strategies. Okay. In retirement, that's generally going to include things like managing your tax bracket during the year and just making sure, are we over the next tax bracket? Is that intentional? Does that have a consequence? Making sure that, again, you're not falling into that Medicare premium trap where you have to pay IRMA. Again, that can be triggered and in place for a couple of years. For us, that's a tax strategy. We're watching what do your RMDs look like? We're going to have to take this much this year. That's going to bump you into this tax bracket. Can we do something to minimize that? Can we do something to offset that? Do you really need it? Maybe it's a good time to do a rollover if we're still a Roth conversion if you're in a low bracket. Looking at all those things each year, during the year. And then obviously projecting it out each year, looking at what are the next few years going to look like. Because if we see something in a few years that's going to look really bad on the tax bracket or the tax percentages, maybe we want to do something in the years before that to help minimize that and keep things in maybe not the lowest bracket, but maybe lower than the top brackets. So looking at all those things on a forecasted basis. So your tax strategies should all be included, in my opinion, and they should at least file your personal tax returns. Personal tax returns, a lot of people do it themselves. It's not too hard with the right software these days. Spoke with somebody who was like, yeah, I use TurboTax, been doing it for a few years. I have no idea what I'm doing, but it tells me that it's all good. Yeah, it can be done, right? And so, I just think those should be included. Why not? If we're setting up the tax and we're telling you what those are, then maybe we should also just put in the return for you. On the legal stuff, why not create your trust, update the trust, your power of attorneys, your healthcare directives, making sure your trust is funded. This is a big one. Michelle, my partner, is on here, and some of my other staff members, we see it all the time. People have a trust, they created it, they funded some things to their trust, but they didn't fund everything to their trust. And they end up in probate, or they end up, one spouse is incapacitated, or the only person is incapacitated, and the kids have to go through a conservatorship. They have to go get court orders to be able to sell the house or access the retirement accounts. Funding your trust is the key to avoiding all those giant probate problems that are ridiculously expensive. Why not also all of the asset protection? Asset protection can be very simple as the right insurance. So making sure your insurance is reviewed with a professional. But it could also be more complex. Maybe it's LLCs or family limited partnerships or things like that. And then protection trust for your spouse or your kids, some type of inheritance asset protection trust. All of these pieces of the puzzle, get them set up and they're good, but then they've got to be maintained. They've got to be kept up to date as life happens. It can't just be a set of legal documents that collects dust in your closet. Got to check in with these things and keep them regular and keep them updated and have somebody who's going to stand behind them in the emergency, so we can tell the financial institutions, we can tell the hospital or the emergency people, this is valid. Legally, we can say this is valid. You need to honor it so that there's not another emergency. All those things should be wrapped into your services. On the financial side, of course, investments, review of your risk. Are you more risky than you need to be? Or maybe you have the ability to take a little bit more risk for some better longer term growth. Managing your cash flow. Creating just a good inventory of all of your accounts. Every one of us, we've got those other few accounts that are just hanging out there somewhere. Just making sure they're tracked and on the spreadsheet and somebody knows about them so we know who to call, etc. Your annuities, reviewing those. In the last 5 years since COVID, annuities have had so many fast moving changes about what benefits they offer, what rates they offer, that even if you got an annuity a year or 2 or 3 years ago, it might be worth looking at and saying, you know what, this annuity, it actually can be rolled into this one and get better benefits for you because maybe that benefit changed or the rates are better. Annuities aren't always just a set it and forget it thing. Reviewing those regularly is worth it. Obviously, life insurance, if that's relevant for you, reviewing that. IRMA, I'm going to put it on both of these categories. We always want to help avoid IRMA. Nursing home. Nursing home expenses are expensive, and either making sure you've got a plan to self-pay for that, looking at options on some types of hybrid annuities that give coverage for it, or maybe looking at your whole plan and saying, you know what, we believe you can self-fund this, but in the event it's catastrophic and it's really expensive, let's make sure there's some asset protection around that through the legal side with some specialized trusts. Maybe you can look at some of those and actually protect assets from nursing homes. But coordinating that with your legal plan is something that should happen naturally here. Arizona's Altex program provides benefits, and while you may not want to make that your first choice, if you want to protect your assets in a way that gives you a last option without having to go broke, maybe that's something to consider. And generally budgeting, even debt reduction can be part of all of that. Looking at, should I pay off the mortgage, or should I put more money in savings, or should I leave my money in my retirement account and keep the mortgage? Things like that, right? There's balances between some of those decisions of whether it's good for you long term. What are the tax impacts if you do, right? You lose a little bit of the deduction on your mortgage interest. Or even, I want to buy a car. Should I finance it or should I pay cash for it? Now there's some tax deductions for interest on car loans. All these things, right? It's hard to come up with a clear answer to it if you don't know how to run all those numbers and compare it to your different tax brackets over the next few years. And so figuring all of that out, each side impacts the other side. I mean, how many times have I heard somebody say, well, my advisor said, I don't give tax advice. And that just kills me, because so much of the decisions in retirement for what investments you pick and how you draw money out are driven not only by tax, but the tax on those decisions is a factor, because it can either reduce your overall growth rate, or it can actually make up for some of that by being able to be in things that don't need as high of a risk to take to get the growth you want. Packaging all of that up is what you've done. So I really truthfully say I haven't been to retirement yet myself. So I really congratulate and honor you guys who have taken all of this and been that CEO where you have to manage the CFO and the COO and the CTO and all these other disciplines and force them together for your benefit. What we do with our retirement management office is we've been able to combine everything, and it ends up basically putting everything under one roof that we just talked about. I know some of you have heard about this before. Some of you maybe haven't, but with the law firm, Keystone Law Firm, and with our financial firm, Lifestyle Planning, we're able to package all of it up into one service, and this is what that looks like. Our clients only pay the investment management fee, and our fees range from about 0.6% up to 1.5%. That's the range, again, depending on how much is managed. And generally speaking, our primary goal with any investments we recommend is to make sure there's no high internal expenses. We use some of the lowest cost funds that are out there. And of course, if something is recommended that has an insurance component or an annuity to it, before we recommend it to you, we make sure you know they're going to pay us a commission. So make sure we are thinking clear-headed before we recommend this. They're going to give us a commission, but we still think it's a good idea for these reasons, and at least making sure you know that that's happening, so we're not hiding any kind of conflict of interest on that. And they get all these services all together. We do this through a little bit of a vetting process, both from us and from you, obviously. This is not for everybody. This is for generally folks who have about $750,000 or more in their life savings that can be invested and are in or near retirement. You know, if you're within a year or two of retirement, it might be the right time to start looking at this. And you're feeling like you're juggling a lot of this, or you're not yet juggling it, but you know you're going to have to, and you don't really want to. You want to be able to hand it over to a professional and who's going to help you make, you know, the best decisions possible. You want to save taxes, and you like optimizing these kinds of plans. You know, that's what we do. We help clients optimize. We say, hey, well, if you do scenario A, it's going to look like this. Scenario B will look like this. Pros and cons of each, and then you get to choose. This is not. I will make sure you guys know this is not for everybody. We don't offer this as a flat fee service. So we've had people ask us, hey, well, can you just analyze my situation from a comprehensive perspective, and then I'll pay you a flat fee, and I myself will go implement it. We don't offer it under that model. If that's something, you know, that we did offer in the future, I'll let everybody know. But we don't offer that right now. If you are managing all of your investments yourself, you know, you've got Vanguard accounts or Fidelity or Schwab or somewhere, and you're picking and choosing and making the investments, and you feel good about that, and you've been doing that for a while, you're probably not paying a bunch of those investment costs that I described. That's excellent. You are basically paying yourself to do the job. And so generally speaking, it's a big change for somebody to do it themselves and then hand it over to somebody who's going to do it for them. So if it's a transition you're interested in, you know, we'll certainly talk about it, but it is something that we manage for you, and obviously with your decisions and your input, but we don't offer this as a advice on how to do it yourself. If you are, you know, just not very optimistic about the future, if you're completely pessimistic about the future and feel like there is nothing that can be done to make the sky brighter, we really work with optimistic and fun-loving and happy people. And, you know, because we work a lot with them. We talk with them a lot. And it's important for my own life and my staff and my team. We want to enjoy coming to work and enjoy who we're talking to every day. And so if you're just not that kind of person, it probably won't be a good fit. I would say keep doing what you're doing. The other thing is if, I have no desire to break up a professional relationship that's working really well. So if you're working with professionals who are coordinating everything and they're working together and they're optimizing all the different pieces of this puzzle, and it feels like they are really jointly working for you collaboratively, that's what this is. You may not find a lot of value in making a switch. So I would never ask somebody to break a relationship that's working really well. I would just say congratulations, you found something that's unique and valuable, and I really congratulate you for that. We also don't yet have a really solid way to offer this for people who only have a real estate portfolio. So we work with a lot of clients in Keystone who have large real estate portfolios, and that's really where their wealth resides. There are unique aspects to real estate portfolios, how they're managed, the tax implications, when to sell, when to roll over 1031, all these things. And we just don't have the current systems in place to deliver this in the way I would want for people who only have their wealth in real estate. Now, that's not to say if you have real estate and you also have other investments in IRAs or 401ks or investment accounts that we couldn't work with you. We absolutely could. But that is how we charge for our services. It's only on the investment accounts that we manage. And so we can't charge on the value of real estate to help you make those kinds of strategic decisions. But we still can do your estate plan, absolutely. So that's a little bit about what this is. All of these services are things I think you should get. I think you should get. I think you should ask for them, whoever you're working with. I don't think you should feel shy about asking for them. It's things that I think as the industry is learning about this sort of combined model, it's realizing that people are starting to expect more for what they've been getting or what they've been paying. And I think it's a valid request that all of these things should be covered by your one investment management fee. And that's how we've built it. So that you don't have to pay for the tax return out of pocket. You don't have to pay for the legal services out of pocket. You're only changing maybe from one manager to another, but you're getting everything else. And those are my talking points today. I'm happy to go over questions about this or about anything else if anybody has them. My big hairy goal for next year will be to make sure everybody knows about what I'm going to talk about at the next webinar. So please sign up and come to that. Let me get the link for that and post it. What we're going to talk about there, like I said at the beginning, is a new service Keystone is offering, which is how, if you need to name a professional as a successor trustee for your estate, how Keystone can do that. So next webinar, 11/25, and here is the link in the chat box. If you, whoops, let me grab this second link. If you want to talk about this stuff with me or with Carmi, our CFP, I welcome. You can do that. We'll do just a free quick call and see what's happening. How do you do it now? Okay, you're doing this. Okay, and then I'll say, well, I think we might be able to help with this or that or that. And if you want to, what we do is we do the first two appointments. There's no commitment, there's no payment or anything like that. These first two appointments are how we get to know you, evaluate your situation, see if there's any value we can add, and it's how you interview us. So you'll see completely what we do, and you can poke holes, ask questions, what about this, what about that? And if we can't answer them, then you can say, these aren't the people for me. And if we get through this process on our end, we might see this has happened. I mean, just I think a couple times this year where we sat down and we said, gosh, I don't know that we can add a lot of value to what you're doing. Like, you've done a really good job. You've got this, and this in place. You're managing this. I'm not sure we can add a lot of value. And we're frank and straightforward with them, and they are not clients. So we're not going to try to convince you of anything. We're just only going to tell you if we think we can add value. Those 2 appointments, there's no cost for them. We can do them in the office here. We can do them by video. I like doing them in person if you can. And then we will tell you, here are all the things we see that could be improved. You know, maybe some tax strategies, maybe some investment stuff, maybe some nursing home things, maybe some trust or funding things. We'll give you everything at that second appointment that we recommend or that we've spotted can be improved. And then we'll ask, you know, do you want us to help you implement this? So to schedule with me, you can click on the second link that's in the chat box. It'll take you right to my calendar. Just find a time, book it, and we'll chat about whether or not going through those 2 appointments would make sense for you. Anybody have any questions? Not seeing anybody popping up with questions in the chat, which is perfectly fine. Maybe that's because it was abundantly clear. Hopefully so. Well, awesome, guys. Well, I will see you guys next week on next week's webinar. Any questions at all, you know how to find us. You know how to get in touch with us at the firm. We'd love to do anything we can to help you. Everybody have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care.